Hello everyone, welcome back to my clockmaker scene process. In this fifth and last video, we are going to add final details to our image and render it with a small camera movement. I'm starting moving up the clockmaker and moving his face border backward to get the shadow pop out. Then I adjust the shader of the lamp near the window. It had too much lighting going through, so I decreased the subsurface to 0. I now want to add some vegetation. There is a ton of add-ons that can help you with making grass or vegetation, but for now I don't like to rely on add-ons, so I'm testing stuff. Here I tried to make moss using the metables. This was something new to me. Metables are elements melting one into another when they are close enough. I usually use them to simulate cartoon liquid bulbs or melting elements. I applied to the moss a copy of the bright leaves material. People are generally using planes for vegetation. I like to have real volumes to get something more stylized. But as I told you before, I have to be sure that my subdivision modifiers iteration are not too high, to keep the scene's polygon count low. The metables are pretty low in polygons, and you can easily adjust their resolution into the metables properties panel. The clock in the foreground was bigger than it should have been, so I isolated the clock's layer to select it and rescaled it down. The window clock's center felt a bit too flat, so I increased its thickness and made it pop out of the window. I also added edges to the ends. Then I wanted to add some colors into the vegetation, so I duplicated a few leaves and changed their color to a pink close to the roof's pink. When adding new elements, I don't want to completely fill the scene. I find it interesting to play with the contrast between empty spaces and filled spaces. There's probably a bit of scenography here, and I think that studying fields related to space or design are a great way to increase your skill in the making of tiny scenes. I had the feeling that the scene lacked of contrast, so I decided to decrease the sun's intensity to 0.5 and to increase the window spotlight intensity from 20,000 to 30,000. To make the ceiling lamps pop a little bit more, I'm creating a spotlight directed toward them. I'm keeping a low intensity because I still want them to be in the shadow. I duplicated the golden metal border from the left wall to make it look less flat. Here, I'm just duplicating metables and scaling them around to cover the base with moss. With all that moss, there was a bit too much green in the scene for me, so I decided to change the bottom right lamp's color to dark blue. I think that it goes well with the closed robot, and it draws attention to the center of the scene, which is what I wanted. I'm now moving stuff in the scene regarding what feels better in the camera viewport. Sometimes hiding an object with another one is a good way to avoid the eye-catching element. I also added a few details to the desk. I probably should have added a way lot more elements, but I didn't thought about it in the heat of the moment. That's why you want to have a precise concept art before making the scene. To explain myself a little more, in the blockout video I told you about putting small twists in the scene. Having a huge stack of watches on the desk would have been a significant one. I was not convinced with the moss at this point, so I decided to cover it with leaves. I just duplicated 3 grouped leaves and covered the moss with them. Now the scene looks good, it's time to render our image. I changed the resolution to Full HD in the Output Properties panel in the right. Then I increased the orthographic scale of the camera in the Camera Object Properties panel. I now want to add a small camera movement. To do this, I must have the camera selected, then I will add keyframes for the location and rotation of the camera. You can do this just by right-clicking them in the transform panel. Open it with N if it's closed. I'm then duplicating these keys on the timeline. They will be the initial and the final state of the camera, so it loops. I move the camera a little bit in the viewport, and I insert my new keys from the transform panel. This will be my camera middle state. Now I just move the final state keys to the end of the timeline, and I put the middle state keys at the end of it. That sounds good to me. The animation is looping, so I don't need to render the 60 frames. I can just render the first half and play it backward to make the second half in editing. To render the first part of the animation only, I go to the Output Properties panel and change the last render frame to 29. Then I select the render folder and render animation. The clockmaker is now complete. I hope you enjoyed seeing my process. Again, do not hesitate to ask me anything in the comments. I will be glad to answer to everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and have a great day.